AD 301, Roman Emperor Diocletian steps out of the palace holding an edict and addresses the people. This edict in my hand is one of the harshest price control laws history has ever seen. The price of bread, meat, cloth, even a single day of a worker's labor, is carved into stone tablets. The rule is clear. If you charge even one extra coin above these prices, the penalty is death. So why would an emperor threaten to execute people over the price of bread? Because Rome was in the middle of one of the greatest economic crises in its history. Prices had spiraled out of control. A century earlier, a tunic could be bought for a few denarii. Now the same tunic required a sack full of coins. And this crisis was one of the sparks that lit the fuse of the empire's collapse. So here's the real question. That familiar unease you feel in your own wallet today. In 2026, rising prices at the market, shrinking purchasing power, a citizen living in Rome felt that same thing 1,700 years ago. And the reason is surprisingly familiar. Rome, just like today's governments, had debased its money. In this video, I'll explain how Rome destroyed its own currency, how that brought the empire to its knees, and how eerily this story overlaps with what central banks are doing today. Watch until the end, because the parallel I'll describe in the final section will probably make you look at something you've seen in the news through completely different eyes. At the heart of the Roman economy sat a single coin, the silver denarius. Under Augustus, in the 1st century BC, this coin was about 95 to 98% pure silver. When it was paid to a soldier as wages, that soldier knew the money in his hand represented real value, because, quite literally, he was holding silver. But as the empire grew, expenses grew exponentially with it. Defending the borders required an army. The army required wages. Keeping the people content required bread and coin. In today's language, social spending and public services. So where was the treasury supposed to find all this money? And this is exactly where one of history's oldest and most dangerous economic tricks came into play, debasing the currency. Nero, in AD 64, was one of the first emperors to pull this trick on a large scale. He dropped the silver content of the denarius down to around 90%. Sounds like a small difference, doesn't it? But it gave the state the power to create free money. With the same amount of silver, you could now mint more coins. The problem was, while the number of coins in circulation grew, the actual amount of silver backing them did not. This is the Silver Age equivalent of what economists today call expanding the money supply. The emperors who came after Nero rediscovered this trick and never let it go because in the short term, it worked. The treasury looked full, soldiers could be paid, construction projects could continue. But it was a snowball effect. Under Commodus, toward the end of the 2nd century AD, the silver content dropped to around 70%. Under Septimius Severus, it fell below 50%. And by the mid-3rd century AD, especially during what's known as the crisis of the 3rd century, things spun completely out of control. Under Gordian III and the emperors who followed, the so-called silver denarius contained less than 5% silver. In other words, the coin in your hand was really nothing more than silver-coated copper. The people weren't fools. Merchants, soldiers, farmers, everyone noticed these coins weren't as valuable as they used to be. And when people realize something is losing its value, what do? They try to get rid of it. They start pricing goods and services in terms of this diluted money, meaning they raise prices. The result, one of the first great inflationary waves recorded in Roman history. According to historians' estimates, the prices of some basic goods rose by more than 1,000% during the 3rd century crisis. A soldier could take his monthly pay and not even be able to afford half the bread he could have bought with it a month earlier. And this brings us back to the scene I mentioned at the beginning. In AD 301, Diocletian issued the edict on maximum prices. He set price ceilings for thousands of goods and services, from wheat to olive oil, from a tailor's stitching to a lawyer's consultation fee. The logic was simple. Prices are rising insanely, so we'll freeze them by law. But real life doesn't work that way. If a farmer believes that selling wheat at the fixed ceiling price would hurt him, what does he do? He stops selling it, hoards it, or turns to the black market. Before long, shelves emptied, The black market exploded, and the Roman emperor's edict collapsed. Within a few years, it was quietly abandoned. This is a bitter lesson economic history teaches us. Freezing prices by law, without solving the root cause of inflation, doesn't work. Rome learned this lesson the hard way. So what did this currency debasement actually cost Rome? First, trust collapsed. When soldiers saw that their wages were worthless, their loyalty wavered. It's no coincidence that about a dozen emperors were assassinated during the 3rd century. The army was running out of patience with leaders who either couldn't pay them or paid them in worthless money. Second, trade collapsed. No one wants to make long-term agreements in a currency of uncertain value. Merchants began reverting from coins to bartering goods directly, an incredible step backward for an advanced empire. Third, the tax system collapsed. When a state could no longer cover its expenses with taxes collected in worthless money, it was forced to shift to taxation in kind, collecting grain, livestock, and other goods directly instead of currency. This, in turn, increased bureaucracy and coercion. The fall of Rome certainly wasn't caused by money alone. There were other factors too, like barbarian invasions, political instability, and overextended borders. But most historians agree, monetary collapse acted as a multiplier that amplified every other problem, wearing down the empire's resilience against crises. Now let me ask you a question. Look at the $100 bill in your wallet. What makes it valuable? Unlike the Roman Denarius, there's no gold or silver inside this piece of paper. Its value rests entirely on the principle of we trust it, what economists call fiat money. In other words, it's valuable because the state says it's valuable. This system passed through a major turning point in 1971. U.S. President Nixon completely ended the system that tied the dollar to gold. From that moment on, the world moved for the first time in history to a fully trust-based global monetary system. So how does this connect us back to Rome? Roman emperors created free money by reducing the silver content of their coins. Today's central banks do the same thing digitally by printing money. In economics, this is called monetary expansion, or as people commonly say, printing money. During 2020 to 2021, amid the pandemic, the world's major central banks, especially the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Fed, printed trillions of new dollars. In Rome, the emperor multiplied the apparent same amount of money by reducing the silver in each coin. Today, the central bank grows the money supply by injecting new cash into the economy. Both produce the same outcome. The amount of money circulating increases, but the real value it represents, goods, services, production, doesn't grow at the same pace. Too much money ends up chasing the same amount of goods. Prices rise. Diocletian tried to freeze prices by law and failed. Today, some governments show similar reflexes, imposing price ceilings on certain goods, introducing export bans. History shows us that these measures, without resolving the root cause, only try to suppress the symptom, and they usually produce side effects like shortages or black markets. In Rome, soldiers and ordinary people lost trust once they saw their money losing value. Today, too, when inflation is high, people's trust in governments and institutions declines. Surveys confirm this again and again. Economic distrust turns into political distrust, just as it did in Rome. Rome didn't collapse in a day. It was the result of decisions that accumulated slowly over centuries. Every emperor, in his own time, thought that a small currency debasement just this once wouldn't be a problem. But when these small decisions piled up on top of one another, they broke the economic backbone of an entire empire. Today, we find ourselves within a similar equation. The difference is this. All Rome had was the ability to dilute silver coins. What we have is a version of digital money printing that's far faster and far larger in scale. Perhaps the clearest lesson history teaches us is this. Money isn't just a piece of paper or a metal, it's the tangible form of the trust a society places in itself and its institutions. And once that trust is seriously shaken, rebuilding it is far harder than breaking it. Rome learned that the hard way. The question is, will we learn this lesson in time? If this video caught your interest, would you like me to go deeper into Rome's other dynamics of collapse, or take a closer look behind the scenes of modern inflation? Let's meet in the comments.